Picture this. You check your accounts one ordinary Tuesday night, add up the numbers like you have 100 times before, and there it is. 7 figures. $1 million. You wait for the feeling, the fireworks, the moment you always imagined, where everything finally clicks into place and the weight lifts off your chest. But nothing happens. You sit there in the same chair, in the same apartment, with the same tightness in your stomach you had yesterday. No confetti, no relief, just you, staring at a number that was supposed to change everything. This is the part nobody posts about. Not the influencers flexing beside rented cars. Not the finance gurus selling you the dream of just hit a million and you're free. Because here's the truth almost no one says out loud. The number everyone chases might not fix what you think it will. Not your anxiety, not your relationships, not the voice in your head asking if it's enough. So if hitting the milestone doesn't deliver what you expect, what actually does? That's exactly what we're unpacking today, starting with the biggest myth keeping you stuck long before you ever get there. Here's the part that catches almost everyone off guard. The habits that get you to $1 million are almost never the habits people assume. It's not some secret high-income hustle. It's the boring stuff. Cooking at home more than you'd like to admit. Driving the same car 5 years past when your friends upgraded theirs. Automating your savings so it happens before you even see the money, before you can talk yourself out of it. Unglamorous, repetitive, quietly disciplined choices made over and over for years when nobody was watching and nobody was impressed. And then the number hits and something shifts, not all at once. It starts small, a nicer dinner out because you've earned it, a slightly bigger apartment because you can technically afford it now, a car upgrade because why not? You worked hard for this. Each choice feels reasonable in isolation. That's exactly what makes it dangerous. Lifestyle creep doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel like losing control. It feels like enjoying your success. But quietly, month after month, the very habits that built your wealth get replaced by the habits that erode it. This is where the myth does the most damage, the belief that more money automatically means more security. It doesn't. Money without guardrails just raises the ceiling on how much you can lose. Without the same discipline that got you here, $1 million doesn't protect you. It just gives you more room to slide backward before you notice you're falling. The people who actually hold on to wealth, who keep growing it instead of watching it quietly bleed away, aren't the ones who suddenly develop more willpower once they're rich. They're the ones who treat the same modest habits that built the wealth as non-negotiable, milestone or not. So the real question isn't whether you can afford the upgrade, it's whether you're willing to protect the exact behaviors that got you here, even after they stop feeling necessary. Because what happens next, the threshold most people never even realize they're chasing, changes everything about how that question gets answered. We treat $1 million like it's the finish line, like there's a line drawn in the sand, and the moment you cross it, the anxiety stops. The tightness in your chest finally lets go, and you get to exhale. But that's not how it works, because the real threshold was never about a specific number. It's about something far more slippery and far more dangerous if you don't catch it in time. Think about the person who swore that $100,000 would change everything. They hit it, and quietly, without even noticing, the target moved to 200,000, then 500, then a million. Each time, the goalpost slides just out of reach, and each time, they tell themselves the same thing. Once I get there, I'll finally feel okay. But there isn't a place. It's a moving target. And if you never stop to redefine what enough actually means to you, you can hit every milestone on the list and still feel like you're falling behind. This is the invisible threshold, not a dollar amount, but a mindset shift. It's the moment you stop measuring your life by the next number and start asking a completely different question. What would actually make me feel secure right now with what I already have? Most people never ask that question. They assume the feeling of enough will simply arrive on its own, somewhere down the road. Once the balance gets big enough, it won't. Not without you deciding on purpose what enough looks like. And here's the cost of skipping that step. The people who never redefine enough don't just stay anxious at $100,000. They stay anxious at 1 million, at 5 million. The number keeps climbing, but the peace never shows up. Because peace was never about the number in the first place. Meanwhile, the people who do the internal work, who sit down and actually define what security and freedom mean for their specific life, get to feel the relief early. Sometimes long before they're anywhere near 7 figures. So before we go any further into the tactics and the mistakes, sit with this for a second. If you can't name your number, the actual definition of enough for you, then no amount of money is going to deliver the feeling you're chasing. And that gap between the balance in your account and the peace in your mind shows up nowhere more clearly than in the difference between two people with the exact same net worth. Meet two people, same net worth, down to the dollar, same age, same industry, same tax bracket. On paper, indistinguishable. But look closer at their lives and you'll see two completely different realities. The first checks his accounts every night before bed, refreshes the app during meetings, feels a flicker of panic every time the market dips 0.5%, even though he knows, logically, it doesn't change anything about his life next week or next year. He's hit the number everyone told him would fix this feeling, and yet the feeling is still there, just as loud as it was at half the balance. The second hasn't looked at her portfolio in 3 weeks. Not because she's careless, but because she built something the first guy never did. A system, automated contributions, a clear allocation she trusts, a defined number that represents enough for her specific life, and a plan for what happens if the market drops 30% tomorrow. She already knows what she'd do, so there's nothing left to panic about. The uncertainty has already been handled in advance on a calm day, instead of being figured out in real time during a scary one. That's the actual difference, not the size of the number, not some innate personality trait one of them was lucky enough to be born with. Systems and identity. The anxious millionaire is still operating from the same scarcity mindset that got him here, just with more zeros attached to it. Every dollar still feels like it needs to be watched, defended, controlled. The calm millionaire made a quiet but critical shift somewhere along the way. She stopped identifying as someone chasing money and started identifying as someone who manages it. That single shift in identity changes everything downstream. It changes how she reacts to market news, how she makes decisions under pressure, how much mental space money takes up in a given day. Here's what should worry you if you recognize yourself in the first example. Without that shift, more money doesn't calm the anxiety down. It amplifies it. Bigger balance, bigger fear of losing it, same sleepless nights, just with higher stakes attached. The number was never going to save you. Only the system does that. And only an identity shift makes the system feel natural instead of forced. So the real question isn't how much you have. It's whether the way you think about money today would still make sense at 10 times the amount. If it wouldn't, that's exactly where the real work begins, long before the math even enters the picture. Here's something almost nobody explains clearly, and it's the reason so many people feel poorer at $1 million than they expected to. That number on your screen, the one you worked years to reach, is not the number you actually get to keep. It's closer to a starting point in a negotiation, and there are 3 quiet forces at the table working against you the entire time. The first is inflation. Money sitting still doesn't stay still in terms of what it can buy. $1 million today, left untouched, buys meaningfully less in 15 or 20 years. Not because you did anything wrong, but because prices keep climbing, well, whether your balance does or not. It's like standing on a treadmill and calling it walking forward. You have to actually move to gain ground. The second is fees. And this one is sneaky because it doesn't feel like a cost in the moment. A 1% advisor fee sounds small, almost nothing, but compounded over 30 years, that 1% can quietly eat a six-figure chunk out of your final balance. Not because anyone did anything dishonest, just because small percentages, taken every single year, add up to enormous numbers over enough time. Most people never run that math. They just see 1% and move on. The third, and the one that catches people completely off guard, is sequence risk. Imagine two people who retire with identical million-dollar portfolios and identical average returns over the next 20 years. One retires right before a market crash. The other retires right before a boom. Even with the exact same average return, the person who hits the crash early can run out of money decades before the other one, simply because of when the losses happened, not how big they were. The order of returns matters just as much as the returns themselves, and almost nobody accounts for that until it's too late. This is when your money quietly works against you, not through some dramatic collapse, but through inflation nobody warned you about, fees nobody added up, and timing nobody controls. The people who protect their wealth aren't the ones who got lucky with better returns. They're the ones who understood these three forces early enough to build around them, instead of discovering the hard way what happens when you don't. Nobody prepares you for what happens to your relationships once people find out. It starts small. A cousin mentions a car repair he can't quite cover. A friend jokes about how you could definitely help with the down payment now. An old classmate resurfaces after years of silence, suddenly warm, suddenly curious about how you're doing. Every conversation starts carrying a little extra weight because you can no longer tell if someone wants your time or your money, and that uncertainty is exhausting in a way nobody warns you about. Then comes the resentment, and this one stings the most. Some of the people who supported you on the way up start pulling away once you arrive. Not because they're bad people, but because your success holds up an uncomfortable mirror to their own choices. A sibling gets quieter. A close friend stops returning calls the way they used to. You didn't do anything wrong. You just changed the dynamic, and some people don't know how to stand next to that without feeling smaller. And underneath all of it sits something rarely spoken out loud. Loneliness. The specific loneliness of having something most people want, and realizing you can't fully talk about it with most of them. You edit yourself around family. You downplay wins around friends. You start wondering who would still be here if the money disappeared tomorrow. And for a lot of new millionaires, that question doesn't have a comfortable answer. This is the part the highlight reels never show. Wealth doesn't just change your bank account. It quietly renegotiates every relationship in your life. And if you're not prepared for that shift, it can leave you richer and more isolated at the exact same time. For years, the grind wasn't just something you did, it became something you were. The person who worked late, who tracked every dollar, who said no to nights out because there was a goal to hit, a number to reach, a future version of yourself waiting on the other side of enough sacrifice. That identity got you here. It built the wealth, the discipline, the whole foundation. But almost nobody warns you what happens once the goal is actually met and the grind no longer has anywhere left to go. This is where things get strange. You'd expect relief. Instead, a lot of people feel unmoored, restless, almost guilty for not working as hard as they used to, even though there's no longer a financial reason to push that hard. The habits that built the wealth don't come with an off switch. They don't know how to stop because stopping was never part of the plan. So people do something unconscious and quietly self destructive. They manufacture new problems to solve, new risks to take, new grinding to do, not because it's necessary, but because without it, they don't know who they are anymore. This is the part that cost people everything they built, and it rarely gets talked about. Miss this mental shift, and you will find a way to sabotage the exact security you spent years creating just to feel useful again. The overly aggressive investment that didn't need to happen. The business venture chasing a feeling instead of a plan. The refusal to ever slow down, even when slowing down is exactly what the moment calls for. The people who navigate this well do something deliberate. They consciously build a new identity before they need one. Not the person who's still grinding, but something steadier. The person who protects, who mentors, who builds on their own terms instead of out of fear. That shift doesn't happen by accident. It has to be chosen on purpose, usually right around the moment everyone else assumes you should finally be relaxing. Because the version of you that got here isn't necessarily the version equipped to stay here. And knowing the difference might be the most important shift nobody ever tells you to make. So, after all of this, what actually changes once you hit the number? Let's separate the real upgrades from the myths because there's a meaningful difference, and confusing the two is exactly what keeps people chasing the wrong thing. Here's what genuinely changes: optionality. You get real choices most people never have access to. The option to leave a job that's slowly draining you without panicking about next month's rent. The option to take 3 months off between roles or start a business without betting your family's stability on it. That's not a small thing. That's one of the most powerful shifts money actually delivers. Time freedom changes too, and it's bigger than people expect. Not because you stop working entirely. Most wealthy people still work, but because time stops being owned by obligation. You choose the projects. You choose the pace. An unexpected medical bill or a broken transmission stops being a 5-alarm emergency and becomes a mild inconvenience you handle without losing sleep. Fewer emergencies, less adrenaline, more actual stability in the background of daily life. Now here's what doesn't change, no matter how much the highlight reels suggest otherwise. Happiness doesn't automatically follow. Studies and countless real examples show the same pattern again and again. People report similar baseline happiness before and after major wealth jumps, once basic needs are covered. The number moves, the baseline mood mostly doesn't, unless something deeper shifts alongside it. Status doesn't deliver what people expect either. Some new millionaires assume respect and admiration will follow the number. Instead, they find indifference from people who don't know and complicated dynamics from people who do. Status is fragile, comparative, and exhausting to maintain, which makes it a poor substitute for actual peace of mind. And stress relief, the thing most people are secretly chasing this whole time, doesn't arrive automatically either. Without the systems and identity shifts we already covered, new stresses simply replace the old ones. Bigger portfolio, bigger fear of losing it, more assets, more decisions, more things that can go wrong. So the honest answer is this: money buys real, tangible upgrades, optionality, time, fewer emergencies. It does not automatically buy happiness, status, or peace of mind. Those still have to be built deliberately, the same way the wealth itself was. Understanding that distinction early is exactly what determines whether you keep what you build or quietly lose it chasing the wrong reward. Reaching the milestone was never the hardest part. Keeping it is. And this is exactly where so many new millionaires quietly unravel everything they worked years to build, usually within the first few years after they arrive. It rarely happens through one dramatic mistake. It happens through a pattern, and the pattern almost always starts with overconfidence. A few years of good decisions start to feel like proof of some special talent, instead of what it actually was: discipline plus time plus a bit of market cooperation. That overconfidence quietly opens a door to the next temptation: bigger, riskier bets. The friend's business that can't miss. The concentrated position in a single stock because it's felt unstoppable so far. The angel investment made on a gut feeling instead of a process, because surely the same instincts that built the wealth will protect it too. Then there's ego spending, and this one is subtle because it hides behind reasonable justifications. The car upgrade to match a new peer group. The house that's technically affordable but stretches the margin thinner than it should. None of it feels reckless in the moment, it feels earned. But margin is exactly what protected you on the way up. And ego spending erodes that margin quietly, one justified purchase at a time. The people who actually protect what they've built do something almost boring in comparison. They keep the same guardrails that got them here, even after they no longer feel necessary. They stay skeptical of can't miss opportunities, especially the ones that flatter their own ego. They separate identity from net worth, so a bad quarter doesn't threaten who they are, only what they temporarily have. Because the harshest truth about wealth is this: it rewards discipline to build, but punishes the absence of it just as fast once you finally have something worth losing. So let's bring this all the way back to where we started. That night, staring at the number, waiting for a feeling that never came. Now you know why. The million was never the actual goal. It was just the visible marker of something invisible underneath it. The systems, the identity, the definition of enough that either gets built deliberately or gets left to chance. Everyone chasing this milestone is really chasing one of two paths. On one side is the person who keeps climbing toward the next number, and the next, still checking accounts nightly, still anxious at any balance because the internal work never got done. On the other side is the person who did that work early, who built the guardrails, redefined enough on their own terms, and separated their identity from their net worth long before the money arrived. Same possible outcome on paper. Completely different experience of getting there and staying there. Here's the real roadmap then. Not another number to chase, but a short list of decisions to make now, wherever you currently stand. Define what enough actually means for you, specifically, not as some vague future feeling. Build the systems before you need the discipline they provide. Protect the identity that got you here, even after it stops feeling necessary. Do that, and the number becomes a milestone instead of a mirage. So here's the question worth sitting with. Which side of this will you be on? Still chasing a rival, waiting for a number to deliver a feeling it was never designed to give you, or already building the version of freedom nobody warns you about? The quiet kind, the kind that doesn't depend on the next zero. Drop a comment below and tell me honestly where you're at on this journey right now. Whatever the number, that's exactly where the real work begins.